This is the Sex Trafficking Survivor Panel. My name is Kristen Stabline. I'm the Director of Residential Services for Chrysalis Health, and I'll be your facilitator. I have with me Connie Rose and Talisa Espinosa. Jessie Malley was unable, she had a scheduling conflict, so she won't be joining us today. I want to say that they are passing out question and comment cards for you. So if you'll fill those out, we're going to do those at the end. So if you fill them out and pass them to the end, they'll pick them up from you and then they'll bring them up and we can get to that. We'll have time in the end for that. All right, I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about themselves and where they are and what they do. And then we'll get into, their histories.
Hi, my name is Connie Rose. Can you hear me? No, they can't. Can you hear me now? Good? Okay, thanks. Okay. My name is Connie Rose. I have an organization that's called Victim to Survivors, and Victim to Survivors also has another organization that's called the Survivors Advocate Network of Florida. What my role in is that I am a survivor of over 14 years of incest and 4 years of what's called familial sex trafficking. My dad was my pimp. More importantly, what I bring to the table is I bring the voice. I bring a story, I bring a voice, and I help other victims to become survivors and move them forward so that they also have a voice. So we are very honored, Talisa and I are very honored and very humbled to be the survivors here speaking in front of you, and we look forward to all of your questions. Thank you.
My name is Talisa Espinosa, and I, like Connie, am a survivor of sex trafficking. I didn't know my trafficker at the time when I met him. I didn't know that he was a pimp. And so I was in that life for about 4.5 years of just being sold all over the U.S. And I used my voice. I didn't want to share my story for a long time. I kept it to myself because I was just afraid that people would judge me, and I didn't want anyone to know. But I serve a God that has different plans than I do, and that's why I'm here to share my voice with you. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question's for Connie, and Connie, were there any factors that contributed to your exploitation, meaning abuses, or can you tell us anything about the beginning?
Well, as I mentioned before, I am a survivor of incest and sex trafficking. So I grew up in a household where incest, I was told, was our culture. I'm half Greek, half Italian. And so from the age of 2 to the age of 14, I was raped every single day of my life. It was basically like riding a bicycle. Sometimes my bicycle would even be there. And so with that said, in that same household, there was physical violence, there was mental abuse, there was sexual abuse, there was religion abuse, because there were times, and this is very common, there were times that with my perpetrator, which was my dad mainly, I would have to have sex with him. My mother went to church before us to sing in the choir and then go to church and sit right next to my dad in front of God. And just so that you know, between 70 and 92% of sex trafficking victims were sexually violated prior to that. Also, pornography. I learned every single thing, the best prostitute in the world. My dad taught me this. And I also learned how to perform before a camera.
I think it's important to talk about the different faces of a trafficker. And, while Connie's experience was familial pimping and Talisia's was not, that a trafficker, it can be an aunt, an uncle, a mother, a father, a stranger. And even, in cases that, I have a case right now where it's a younger girlfriend that is pimping out a friend of hers. So it's important to understand and for people to know that it just isn't that, we talk about that person with the suit and the cane and that kind of stuff anymore. That often we hear older boyfriend, older girlfriend. Thanks, Connie. Talisa, Can you describe for us the positive and negative characteristics of your relationship with your pimp? I know that you talked about earlier in your story in our earlier session some of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that relationship and what it was like?
Our relationship, I can kind of go back to the beginning of when I first met him. He was very kind, very suave, very well dressed. He kept himself, like manicures, pedicures, just very well kept. And he came off as someone I had never experienced before as far as male figures. He showed me a lot of attention, and so I gravitated to that because I was not used to that as a child. And I sought that attention from a man. And so he was very kind, he was very gentle, very careful with his words and what he would speak to me. And like I said, I didn't know that he was a pimp when I met him. There's kind of two kinds of pimps. There's actually more, but the two main ones are the guerrilla pimps, which are flamboyant. They'll let you know that they're a pimp. And then there's that other pimp, which is the finesse pimp, which was my pimp. He was very finesse, just boyfriend type, you know. He wouldn't let you know that he was a pimp. Well, then later on within that relationship, at the time I did not know when he was coming to recruit me that he already had a girl out working on the streets of Miami. And when I met her was when we had left Miami and we went to Cleveland. And I remember he took us from Cleveland to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And the night that we got to Grand Rapids, Michigan, I didn't have to go out and work because the day before I had been raped in Chicago. And so he allowed me to stay in and he made her go out. Well, then you know, like, how I looked at him was different because that night when she came back in, he beat her. I mean, beat the mess out of her in front of me and said, this is what you want this bee to see. This is what you wanted her to see. And so now my mindset has changed to where, okay, what do I have to do to not make this man beat me? I want to do everything that he says to do. So then my mindset changed of him being kind and gentle and nice to him being very abusive towards her, and then was going to be that towards me.
How far into your journey did that happen? Did it switch?
I had knew him a few months before we had left to Cleveland, to Cleveland, and then when we had went to Chicago, I think it was like a month after. So probably within a 4-month period of just me getting to know him, or him getting to know me. I didn't really ask a lot of questions at that time. I was very naive and green and just wanted to kind of just have him, you know, want to be with me. So I was pretty much willing to do anything that would cause this man to just stay connected.
We talk about, I asked that question because we talk about grooming and that process that a lot of our kids experience, which is that nice, caring, gentle person until they're hooked. And then usually that abuse starts to keep them there. Thank you. Connie, can you give us some ideas about your interactions with any of the systems, DCF, DJJ, foster care, any guidance counselors, therapists, caseworkers along the way?
Well, let me start with, I'm a little bit older, okay? And so I went through this about 40 years ago. And 40 years ago, we were prostitutes and we were whores. And basically, there was no one to go to. However, because I had been sexually abused so many years in my life, and I played really 3 different roles, I would reach out to my teachers at school, never would tell them, because I didn't want to tell them I was a prostitute, but I would hint to them and let them know that my father that was chaperoning the band and sitting on the back of the bus was doing things on that back of the bus with other girls. And I would go to the priest and I would say to the priest, that abortion that I had, you called me out in church because I had an abortion. Can't you please see what's really going on in my home? So I would reach out, but again, we didn't have DCF to reach out to, and we didn't have DJJ to reach out to. So the people that should have also helped to protect me, that knew, family, friends, family, my teachers, my priest, they really just didn't know what to do other than, well, she's just a dirty little girl and a slut and a prostitute, and that's the end of the story.
There was a lot of blaming on the youth. I'm sure that it was your fault, and you probably believed that at that age.
Oh, absolutely. I actually believed that until 2010, when I was doing some research actually for a radio show that I had about Super Bowl. And as I'm researching, it's coming up more and more girls are 11, 12, 13, 14, being brought in to places and then being sold. And I'm like, whoa, that was me. That was me along Hillsborough River. All the mafia lived there, okay? Being dropped off at the Floridian Hotel when conventions and things were going on. So having, as horrific as it sounds to say, now you have a label, to have a label of a survivor of domestic minor sex trafficking and not a prostitute was such an aha moment for me and so empowering.
Wow, that's fantastic. Talicia, I know that you had mentioned early in our session that you had experience with foster care. Can you tell us anything about maybe along the same lines, any helpful people or things that didn't help, things that through your experience with that?
Well, when I was in foster care system, of course I was younger. When I was trafficked, I was 20. I had just turned 20. But the foster care system, when I was in it, I moved around a lot. And so within the foster care system, because there's not a main place for these children to go to, say you take them from one home they're staying in for about a year, and something goes wrong and you move them out of that home and you put them into another home, and they're not getting along with the other kids, or the foster parents are not being very nice, which some of my foster parents were not very nice. And so now they start getting into the habit of running away. All you need is one person to tell you, come run with me. And these girls are on the run. And so I love that DCF has gotten in, they have a big part to play in the fight against human trafficking, because of the fact that more and more children that are running away from the foster care system are coming back in and recruiting other kids. Mm-hmm. And it's because the foster parents are not showing them attention. They don't get along with their peers. And so the only other person that they can get along with is this man that shows them that he cares and that he wants to take care of them. And so of course they're going to want to run from the foster care system because no one cares for them, so they think, while they're in the system.
Deputy Secretary spoke about the charges that some of the girls, that we see that some of our girls experience, burglary, petty theft, that they tie back to their experiences on the street and what's happening out when they're on runaway or when they're out on the street. Did you have any experience with DJJ?
I did not have any experience with DJJ, but I have had plenty of experience with law enforcement. I have been arrested. I can't even count. I'm in the process, actually in an appeal process with DCF, because right now, as the law states it, if you have prostitution on your background, that you cannot work or volunteer in the foster care system, or with young girls, or even with elderly. So right now at this point, where my passion is to work with these young girls, I cannot, or volunteer with them in a home setting. Now if it was like in a public setting, I can, but not in a private setting because of my record. And so I will be glad to take advantage of the bill that was just passed that will be in effect January 1st, so that way I can get my record vacated, so that way I can work with girls. But definitely with law enforcement, been arrested in probably about, I was trafficked in about 15 states, 21 cities within those 15 states, and I've been arrested in probably more than half of those. So just even trying to get all my records from everywhere has been a menace. But it's well worth it. I have to say that, because these girls matter.
Great, thank you. Can you tell, Talicia, can you tell us about any fears that you might have had coming out of the life?
Well, like I said earlier, my biggest fear was that, one, that people would judge me if they knew that I had been a prostitute. And I kind of have to say that when I started kind of doing research, because I knew that I had warrants that I had to get taken care of, and so I started looking myself up. But when I started looking up prostitution, because, you know, when you're in that life, you're not hearing, oh, you're a sex trafficking victim. You're hearing you're a prostitute, you're a hoe, you're a whore, you know, you're not going to amount to anything. So you don't put prostitution with sex trafficking if you're in that life. You know, a girl's not going to come up to you and say, oh, I've been trafficked. They don't even know what that is. You know, and so that was my case, was when I started looking up prostitution, sex trafficking came all over. I mean, it was everywhere, and I was like, what in the world is that? And so when I started reading, I had no clue, and I didn't even see myself as a victim. And so someone had to tell me that I was a victim. I was like, no, that was my choice. And they said, no, that was not your choice. He played on your emotions and on the things that you wanted in life. And so I had to be told that I was a victim. And same thing with these girls. And the fear coming out of it was, if you knew what I did, you wouldn't want anything to do with me, or you would judge me, or you wouldn't want to sit right next to me. So that was my biggest fear, because I didn't want anyone to know.
Connie, how has the exploitation affected your life?
So many ways, and some are negative, you know, and then there's some wonderful positive, and I'll start with the positive part first, because my son got married on Sunday. Thanks. And for me to have children was huge, because I was never ever going to have a child. Forget about having two children, because I have a daughter also that's in chiropractic school. But what it really did is, at the age of 19 is how I got out. It was when I got out, and I got out because I got married. And you see, when you are, you know, of my culture, women at that time, girls didn't need to have a degree, but more importantly, my father felt that he taught me everything. Just use your body. And every skill that I have taught you from the time you were 2 until you're 19 years old, that's all you're ever going to need. So I decided getting married was the clue. And what did I know about love? I had no clue what love was, because I was the classic Stockholm Syndrome victim. So at 19, I'm getting married, and just quickly, right before we walk down the aisle, my father turns to me and says, we don't have to do this. I'm like, yeah, we do. And he goes, nope, the car's waiting. You and I will live the rest of our lives together as husband and wife. I think I ran down the aisle, to be quite honest with you. Not really sure, but I know that I was married, and I was married for 3.5 years. And because, I really believe, because of how I grew up in the relationship that my parents had, because my father also did a lot with my mother, putting her out there with other people. I've been married 3 times. But now I really know what love is, because I was fortunate enough to have come back into my life the same person that I was dating when I was 13 years old, and he was a couple years older, and he was my angel then, because he gave me the strength to tell my mother that I was being sexually abused all those years, even though nothing was done. And then he came back in my life 3 years ago when I said, okay, I've been speaking for 20 years, but now on sexual abuse, now it's time to talk about that I was a prostitute, I was a whore, I was a slut, but I am a survivor of domestic minor sex trafficking. So it really affects your life, because as Talicia said, You know, you still have these doubts sometimes when you share. Like, how is someone in this audience going to look at me later on? Are they really going to look at me as a really strong, empowered, amazing, independent woman that has a lot of confidence and shares her story because God is the one that drives that message? Because it's so important, because there's probably other victims sitting right out in this audience. So you're always second-guessing yourself. You're always looking behind your back. That doesn't ever go away. But what does happen is that, and I believe this with all my heart and soul, is that we all have a cross to bear. We all have something in our lives, and we all have to find what is our journey, what is our purpose, what is that purpose for us to walk through. Find it, be passionate about it, do something about it, and become your own person. And that's who I am today.
Thank you. Talisa, yes, and I think I'll ask both of you this next question, but Talisa, if you want to go, can you tell us one thing that would have saved you from the life?
When I seen this question, I kind of sat back and was like, okay, what would have saved my life? And I have to say, probably nothing at that time. No one could have talked me out of living that life at that moment. You probably would have had to catch me on a night that he beat me. And then I probably would have been, okay, talk to me. But at that moment, in real time, I have to say that nothing could have deterred me from, or nothing could have made me walk away from that life, because I loved him with everything that I knew in me, how to love, and I didn't really know how to love at that time. But during those 4.5 years, I loved him with every part of my being. And so just to even try and make me walk away from him or talk me out of it, it probably wouldn't have happened. Yeah, it probably wouldn't have happened.
I think, this is a really important message for all of you who, come into contact with children who are victims. I have them in residential care, and I always talk about, the realistic expectation of that youth who is in that state of, they don't need your help, and what can you do? And what are you trying to provide? What is the service that you're trying to provide for them? And is it something that they want? Is it something that they need? So that's really important, I think, to know.
Just to, follow up on what you just said, a lot of people, when they're getting into this, sex trafficking is such a now word right now. There's awareness going on everywhere in the entire United States. But the girls that organizations work with, if you're working with these girls or even boys, and they're in and out, and you cannot expect anything from them, nothing, because they can't give it to you, because they don't even know what to give you. Some of them are so, these pimps have their minds just totally on them and making money, and that it's cool, that to make this money. Well, there's nothing that you can expect from them. What they expect from you is to love them no matter what, and to have patience with them. Whether they are in your care for a little while and they run and they go back into that life, to go back to that pimp, are you still willing to love that girl? Are you still willing to stay committed to this child that has no clue what a father or a mother figure looks like? Are you willing to stay? And so when I do a lot of my public speaking and around, I tell them, are you willing to stay committed? Because it's a long-term commitment. It's not just like a marriage. It's a lifetime commitment. And are you willing to stay?
Can I piggyback on that? Because we're talking about children, but you also need to realize there are a lot of adults that are walking out there. Either it happened to them when they were a child. We also have adults. I know a woman that actually went into the life to save her own daughter. So we have adults that you're working with also. So like Talisha said, you have to be willing to be committed to this person along that complete journey. And when that survivor, let's just say that survivor has to be a witness. Okay? Right. And that survivor is done. She's done her legal part of it. Don't drop her. Because that's what's happening. Okay? They do their job that everyone has asked them to do. They trusted you. They bared their gut and their soul to you. And then, done. So what have you done really to this survivor is you totally re-victimize them. So please, if you are going to take this commitment and you make a decision that your passion and your purpose in life is to work with survivors of human trafficking, then you need to look at yourself and make sure that you can take that commitment and run with it basically for the rest of your life.
That's great advice. The next question would be then, what can you tell the audience or people that want to do something? How can they help these resistant girls? What is something that they can do that would, anything that they could do that would help a child who is resistant?
First thing would be believe them. Okay, because what happens is people, oh, well, why would I believe her? She's been on the street, she's run away, she's a drug addict, she's an alcoholic. How do I even really know this happened if she was drugged out and strung out and whatever? I don't care. Until it's proven that that didn't really happen to them, you need to believe them. And then what else can you do that's easy? We already said. You make a commitment, you stick with that commitment. So if you say you're going to be there on Thursday night at 6 o'clock, you better be there every single Thursday night at 6 o'clock. And if you're not, you better have a really good reason why and have a backup that survivor can trust. Okay, the other thing is we have these yellow stickers, and they're actually at my table. And it's something that's so simple to move you all into action. And it's going to save someone's life because it has the Polaris Project hotline number, the 1-888-3737-888. It's called Paint the Town Yellow or Paint Florida Yellow. You're going to take a sticker, you're going to plot it before you squat. And that means, because for me, the only place my father did not go with me was in that bathroom stall. So you can save a life. It's really easy. Take a sticker, put it there. They'll memorize the number because it's so odd. And why not?
Thanks. Connie, what's been the greatest achievement or most meaningful moment during your journey?
I have lots of those. I'm just going to share two real quickly. One is there was an event that I spoke at a church about a year and a half ago, and an 82-year-old woman came up and said, I have been quiet 70 years. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for having a voice. The other is watching our documentary that we just had air on WEDU and knowing the survivors that I work with to help them have that voice so that they can do things like documentaries and media contributions and sit on a survivors panel and help move them forward, because, you see, survivors are really part of the process. We aren't your token. We aren't the person that's supposed to be up and be the little puppet for you when you're doing a fundraiser. If it wasn't for survivors, this is my soapbox, if it wasn't for survivors and us having the strength to come and be in front of you and share our stories, then why are you even here doing what you're doing? Because your whole reason for what you do is to move victims to be survivors.
Can you tell us now maybe the greatest disappointment?
My greatest disappointment is I am actually working with a survivor from the Treasure Island case. And I talk to her almost every single day. She has no place to live. She did everything she was told to do so there could be a conviction. She has no place to live. She has no money. She is in and out of jail. There is no support system for her. And this is not about bashing anyone, law enforcement or anyone, because we happen to have the greatest task force that there is in the United States right here, and we're very fortunate. On the other hand, every time I talk to her and I hear her crying, and she says to me, I'm going to go buy stripper shoes and I'm going to go back into the life, she rips a little bit more out of me, because I really get then very angry that if she did what she was supposed to do, where is that support system for her?
Alicia, once you were out of the life, what interactions or interventions did you find helpful or reinforcing?
Like I said it before, I didn't want anyone to know that I had just come out of that life, and so I actually didn't have any interventions or any contact with anybody. I actually didn't even speak to law enforcement until 2010. I've been out of the life since 2001, and so I didn't really share what had happened to me until 2010. Because of the fact that just being, all of the shame and the guilt. And so I didn't really have any interventions. But on here, on my notes, I was writing, and I say in my notes that I truly believe by having organizations and people who have patience and a compassion for these girls will help them. So there's all kinds of organizations out here that are helping these young ladies in their restoration process. And I really truly believe, and it kind of piggybacks on the last question that you had asked about the helping the girls that are resistant for the help. And for you organizations that do not have survivors helping you, you need survivors to help you. Law enforcement needs survivors to help them, because when they come and when these officers either arrest the women or children, even though they have made it where the children are no longer criminals but victims, but there are still some that are being arrested. When you arrest them and say you're going to do a big bust, if there's any law enforcement here in the room, if you know that you're going to do a big bust, and you know a survivor that's out speaking and is willing to share her story, ask her if she's willing to come and sit in the room with you while you interview this girl. Because she's going to be quicker to talk to the survivor than she's going to be quicker to talk to you. I didn't talk to any law enforcement. We were trained to say we didn't have a pimp when we were asked. They'd always say, who's your daddy? I'm like, I don't have a daddy. And I'd be lying to them. I'd be literally just like bombarded with questions, and I would lie and lie and lie and lie and lie, and they'd let me go. But when you have a survivor that's been through it and has been rehabilitated and is willing to work with law enforcement, use them. Not just to use them and throw them away and be like, oh, I, got her to share, and then, like how Connie was saying, just throw them to the side also. No, use us. That's why we're sharing our voice, is so that we can help those that are still involved. And the only way that you can really help as organizations is I always say, you can't tell me how to live my life if you haven't walked in my shoes. So you can't tell me how to be able to help another survivor. Yes, you can have your PhDs. Yes, you can have all your, whatever else goes behind your name. You could have all of that. But unless you've walked through someone's shoes and been in their shoes, you can't really tell me how to live. I have to learn. And so that's what I have to say.
Again, I think it's a huge message, because I deal with the most difficult, resistant, not easy to place girls. So It's really important that, and we talk a lot about making connections, small connections that build relationships. And each time they come home, when they leave the house at 2 a.m. and come back in the house at 9 a.m., that there is no judgment, and that they're met with I was so worried about you, are you okay, can I get you something, that we're meeting their basic needs. Because it's those relationships and those connections really that are going to keep them in the house the next time, or they're going to think about being beaten or not being beaten, and maybe they want to stay home today.
Right.
So it's important.
Real quick, I have to say, you have to be real with them. Don't be fake. They can see you from a mile away, 2 miles, 10 miles. They can see if you're sincere or not. So just be you, be real. Don't try and put on a front as far as, oh, I want to help you. Oh, I feel so sorry for you. I'm so sorry that you went through that. No. You know, yeah, you can be sorry that they went through it, but now what are you willing to do? Let me help you. What do you need? What do you need me to do? I want to be that support system for you, you know, and be real.
And have realistic expectations on what they say, because I think that also, you know, I have kids placed with me, and the people who place them oftentimes think that everything's going to be okay now, because they have a safe place to live. No. So have realistic expectations, and the length of time that it takes to see recovery or to see, you know, healing. I think you may have already talked about. We talked a little bit about any opportunity for you to come out of the life, but when after one of those beatings, were there? I mean, if you had gone to the hospital, or were there missed opportunities by professionals that would have been able to see that maybe with knowledge and awareness that we have now, that they could have said to you, what's happening to you, or how can I help you?
Definitely. Like I said, I've been arrested many times, and so, you know, I was trafficked in from 96 through 2001, and so during that time, and you know, and I could probably say for now, it's like, you know, law enforcement are so busy that when you do this arrest, you're just like, okay, well, she's got battery, or you know, even when one time I was arrested, most of the time when you go up, when the police officer are doing reverse things, and the police officers are coming in regular cars, and I had one that came up to me in Dania, and our first thing was, you know, feel on them to make sure they're not a cop. You know, are you a cop? And you're touching all over them. Well, I got arrested that night for battery on a cop because I touched him and he allowed me to touch him. But during that whole process, you know, I was never asked, okay, well, even at that time I wasn't even asked if I had a pimp. They were just like, okay, well, I'm being arrested for battery, and that's all that mattered. And they were getting me off the streets. And so that's one, is that law enforcement, through your trainings and just having a heart for these girls, no matter how vile and just mean they can be to you, still having that patience and that compassion for these girls, knowing, though you know that they're lying to your face. Many of you probably are mothers. My mom used to always say, how can you lie to me in my face? Well, because I can, you know, type of thing. At that time, I had that kind of attitude. So, you know, same thing with these girls. You have to look at them as if they were your child. Yeah, they're going to lie to you to your face, knowing that they have a pimp that's right around the corner, you know, that's watching them. So when you take them, you know, ask the right questions. You know, now that we have all this awareness and you're being trained, you have the answers right in front of you. And so I had plenty of times where, you know, where someone could have asked me, even if I wasn't willing to go at that moment, no one asked. We had organizations in DC that would drive out every night and hand us condoms to make sure that we were having safe sex. Great, because I was having safe sex, but no one's asking you, do you need a place to stay tonight? Are you okay? You know, one night, I always would remember if he was going to hit me, he'd always take off his rings. Well, one day I was going out during the daytime, and he didn't take off his rings, and he just sucker punched me in the side of my face because I didn't want to go out to work that day because my back had given out. Like literally, I had my back was hurting so bad, and he wanted me to go out, and so I had a black eye. Well, I'm at the hospital, with my sister who had went into labor the same day, and no one's asking me, what happened to your eye? Why do you have a black eye? No one asked. And so those are the kinds of things that, when you're seeing these girls, ask questions. Even if they don't want to answer you right then, still ask. No question is a dumb question as long as you ask it.
I think it's really important. With all of the training, I know that all of you are probably in areas that you're being inundated now with training, and if it hasn't come to you yet, it's coming, because I know that we're constantly around the state doing, CSEC trainings and train the trainer trainings, and if you haven't yet brought that training to your organization, seek out the people in your coalitions to make sure that you can, because when we talk about awareness for emergency room personnel and teachers and guidance counselors, it's really important, because if they're aware and they see a black eye, then they'll ask the right questions.
Can I piggyback on that
sure.
for 1 second? Because there's two things that came to mind for me, and one was when I was in high school, and I already talked about guidance counselors and all that, but I skipped school every single day for an hour, every single day, because I had a trick to turn. My dad had set it up, and during my homeroom and one other class, I had to be out and do this. And then I was caught, and I lied. I was a dancer. So I said, I'm practicing because I want to get a scholarship to go to college, and they believed it. Instead of looking at, this is the same child, we know something is really going on in her family, do we take another step? And I'm saying this because if you're a teacher out there, or a guidance counselor, or a principal, pay attention. The others of you are in the medical field. I told you that at 13 I told my mom. She went to her gynecologist because she was hysterical. He wanted to call the police, and she said no. So, when I'm 16, I ended up pregnant. Don't know if it was my boyfriend and I, because we had planned a pregnancy really to get me out of the house, if it was really his, or was it my dad? But the person that took me to that same gynecologist was my dad. So, if hopefully in today's time, in the medical profession, someone would say, her mom's healthy. Why isn't her mother bringing her in? Why is the father? And then he doesn't want her to have an abortion, but the mother does. So please, just open your eyes, pay attention, listen, and share every single thing that you learned today with anyone that's in your influence, in your sphere of influence.
Thanks. So the next question for both of you could be, how can the community assist with interventions in the recovery process? We've talked on some of that, and you really have said, both of you have said, if you're going to do it, stick with it. Is there anything else that you want to share before we get into some questions that they have about what they can do?
Well, and this is something that I actually learned yesterday from a survivor that I was speaking with. We want to run and do something right away, right? So if someone says, you need to donate clothes or gas cards or money or whatever, and you do that, and that makes you feel good, right? But what you're doing is re-victimizing that victim or that survivor. What you do instead, that is just so amazing and so empowering, because you have to think or remember there's no life skills there. If they had life skills of managing money and going out shopping, they lost them. Because when you are so traumatized, when you have someone that's raping you over and over again and giving you drugs and giving you alcohol, or you just have learned how to take yourself and throw yourself on that ceiling, your life skills pretty much are gone. So instead, if you have those gas cards, those clothes, or whatever it is, go with them and take them shopping. Teach them what to do. And you can make it fun and exciting. It doesn't have to be boring, but take them and show them, because then you're doing twofold. One, you're helping them because these are items that they need. But second, look at the skills that you're giving them.
Well, and I think also creating a connection.
Right, and it creates even a more of a connection and more of a bond.
Positive connection that they need, because remember, they're surrounded by negative.
Right.
And I just have to say, from that, I didn't learn, like, while I was in that life, I didn't make any choices for myself. He chose my clothing, he chose my shoes, he chose my food. Everything was, he had full reign of everything. And so these girls that are coming out, even women that are coming out, like Connie says, have no life skills. I didn't learn how to write in my checkbook until I was, probably maybe last year, 2 years ago. I'm 37 years old. No one had ever taught me how to write in a checkbook. I don't use checks. I don't like them. But even still, no one taught me how to manage my money. He managed all the money. What money did I have to manage? Everything that was bought was, I sold my body, I gave him the money, he took care of everything else. So these girls and these women that are coming out, they have no life skills whatsoever. So if you're wanting to, to do something, it's like she said, it's not just giving a gift card, and we love gift cards. We have survivors that other survivors that we work with that need, gas cards, that need food, that need clothing. They have children that need to be taken care of, so all that is good, but you have to be willing to, to get involved with them and get to know them.
Great. Well, I have a number of questions here. I've tried to put them in somewhat of an order. One we can address, or I can address up front. The question is, in human sex trafficking, is human sex trafficking limited to any specific economic status? Oh. And while I work with mainly foster care youth who have been sexually exploited, certainly in Broward County, I have been very active on our task force, and we staff cases of every call that goes through the hotline, and I will tell you that it crosses all socioeconomic levels. So without going into any specific cases, I don't know if you want to add to that or add a story to that, but certainly we've had girls from affluent families as well as kids who have been removed.
I can respond to that. One of the girls that my pimp had gotten, we were in Cleveland, her mother and her father sold her to him to get her away. Like, she was one of those, I want to say, what they call throwaway children. The parents wanted nothing to do with her once she turned a teenager because she was too hard to handle. And so they sold her to him so that he could take her off their hands. And they had lots of money. And so, yeah, it definitely, it does not matter if you're rich, poor, out of the state, in state, out of the country, it just doesn't matter. Yeah.
Anything, Connie?
Just the same thing. It really doesn't. I came from an upper middle class family, lived on the water, in Tampa, was sold sometimes right out of my own house, walking down my driveway, and I'd get picked up. It crosses no boundaries. Prostitution, sex trafficking, it doesn't say, what color are you? What religion are you? How much money does your family make? Do you have parents? Don't you have parents? It doesn't say any of those things. It just says, you're a person, you were probably sexually abused, you're really vulnerable, and guess what? I'm gonna reel you in.
I think that was one of the questions, actually, that I have here that talks about, and I'm just going to paraphrase because I put them in order now. I think somebody asked, was there something that made you easy prey, if you will? Can you think of something that made you an easy target?
Well, the stats, okay, we're not really big on stats, Talisha and I, because sometimes they just are different all the time. But we do know that between 70 and 92% of victims or survivors of human trafficking and sex trafficking were sexually abused before. Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of them have been exposed to pornography. So it's easy, because once, a trafficker gets them and they rape them, well, they already have no feelings. They already look at themselves, well, I've been having sex since I was whatever age it is, so, okay, so another person is just kind of raping me again. And, oh, the pornography, okay, well, it starts off kind of easy, and then it escalates from there, but you know what, I already had saw all that stuff. So that's probably the biggest thing that I want to say is that, the percentage is so high of sexual abuse. So, 2 things we got to do. 1, how are we going to stop so much sexual abuse in families? And 2, what are we going to do about pornography?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that to add to that, and the second part of that question, I wanted to say that in all of the cases that we've staffed in Broward County, that either sexual abuse or domestic violence were present in those cases at some point. Now, I say sexual abuse was there, but there are a lot, when we start to look back at these cases, you see unsubstantiated, probably because the report goes in and the child doesn't disclose, and so the child is left in the home, and then it goes on for years. So we see that in a lot, and domestic violence was the other high. And physical abuse was there, and substance misuse was there, but those are the 2 highest. The second part of that was, what can we do, or what can be suggested for parents so that their children don't become targeted? And I can say, and then you can add to it, that please address the traumas. Get them into therapy early, because if you start to work on these, a little girl who is sexually abused, and if any of you have ever seen the trajectory of sexual abuse and what happens when it goes unaddressed, it is an adolescent girl who is now acting out, right? That's what happens. Their identity is, I am useful for my body, because that's what they've been taught. So, and this is all I can do. They need to be empowered or empowered so that they understand or internally or intrinsically believe that they are something else. Next question. What enabled you to be able to share your story and move forward?
Like I said before, I never wanted to share my story. I didn't want anyone to know. But because I had given my life to Christ, He had different plans. And one time I asked, just praying and just asking God, okay, well, all this that I've ever been through in my life, I know is not in vain. So what do you want me to do? And I kind of just had this unction in my heart to go to a scripture in the Bible, and it was in Proverbs 24, and he says to go rescue those who are being led to their slaughter, rescue those who are being led to their death, that you cannot say that you did not know, because the God who gave you your heart knows that you know. And then he gave me another scripture, and I said, okay, well, what does that look like? Rescuing, I know what it looked like for me. No one really rescued me. I was able to walk away. And then he gave me another scripture, and it was Proverbs 31. And it says to speak up for those who do not yet have a voice, and to ensure justice for the oppressed. And so those 2 scriptures I held on to, and I still hold on to with my very being. And that's what I do. And that's what's given me the strength to be able to share my story with so many, is because I didn't want to, but God was like, people need to hear your voice, because you need to be able to rescue those who are being led to their death.
My driving force was, I had already, told my mom we'd already dealt with that. I had been married, gotten divorced, had my son. He was very, very, very young. And the very first case came out for child abuse, sexual abuse in California in a daycare center. So here I am looking at my 18-month-old son and hearing every newspaper I opened up, every news station, everything was, if you were sexually abused, you will abuse your child. Well, I already shared with you. It took everything I had within me to have this child. So the thought of touching him, forget about sexual abuse. I wouldn't even give him my kids have never had a spanking, okay? And I kept hearing this over and over and over again. So also with that, I said, okay, it's time to go back into therapy. And I did. And the law was just passed that if you know that there is an offender living with minor children, you had X amount of hours to report. So either I had to do it or my therapist had to do it. So I had made a decision. My father had remarried. His new wife knew every single thing about my dad because I told her before they got married. She had 2 daughters and a son. And I went home and I had a conversation with my dad and said, I know what you're doing. My gut is telling me. It's written all over the wall. We had a family meeting, and at that family meeting with the girls sitting there and his new wife and my mother, everything was the same. They were growing up in the house I grew up in, which is what they said I was jealous. They were sitting on his lap the way I sat on his lap. They weren't allowed to go to the bathroom unless he said it was okay. All those signs were there. And even though HRS afterwards, and they of course denied it, went in, talked to the girls, but since they wouldn't come forward, they couldn't do anything at all about it. So what happened is years later, not too many, about 4.5 years later, he was arrested, was on house arrest, mandatory therapy, did not go to jail for his stepdaughters. So that really drove me because I said, okay, I already told her and she did nothing. So I'm going to have to expand out of this little bubble that I'm kind of living in. And I'm going to have to start going to PTAs and to different women's organizations. And I'm going to have the guts, and I'm going to have to share my own personal story. Because I have a soapbox, and my soapbox is every single one of us has something that's either happened to us personally or someone in our family or someone very close to us. So truthfully, nobody else has any judgment they can really cast, even though I kind of have to still work through that sometimes. But the other part of it is, if I don't share my story, if Talisha doesn't share her story, if you don't start looking at whatever skeleton you have in your closet, when that child comes and says to you, I was sexually abused, I've been given drugs, I've been given alcohol, I'm being beaten, and that's kind of a tape in your own head, what are you going to do? Deny, deny, deny. You're not going to get that child the help that they need. Or if you do, you end up going to hit the bottle and the pills and whatever. So, soapbox. Put it away. Look at it for a second and say, this is what happened to me. Now it's in front of me. I am going to go and I'm going to get help and I'm going to bang on every single door until somebody does something about it. And then I'll go take care of myself after I've taken care of this child. And then from then, I've been speaking, I speak internationally. I've been speaking for 20-something years now, so.
That's great. We have some great questions, but we are almost out of time. So I'm going to go through a couple, and I think that if there are a couple here that this afternoon there's a provider panel that we can talk about. There was great discussion about locked facilities. So whoever wrote those, I'm going to take these cards this afternoon because we had a discussion about these panels and what do you think about talking about this. So obviously people want to talk about it, and I'm going to take them and move them to this afternoon. Another one is secured facility, and also somebody had asked about finding qualified foster parents or adoptive parents. I think provider panel this afternoon, I'll take that one also. And to address the awareness, I absolutely believe that because we're talking about it so much and there's so much outreach now that it's bringing awareness. I want to just we have someone that has written, I am a survivor. Where would I go in the Tampa Bay area to join, support with other survivors?
Me!
So I think Connie has a table and information outside, so please, whoever wrote that card, please pick up her information.
Well, truthfully, either one of us, we have different roles in how we do this, but we are both, I'm going to speak for you for a sec, we are both, we're sisters of the souls, for one, and two is that we both have a passion to work with other survivors and help give them that voice, because giving them that voice really takes you so much farther on your journey. So just look for us out there. I have Talicia's cards also if you need her card, and just Victim to Survivors, we're out there, so please.
And just to address for you who's a survivor, that we're here for encouragement. You know, it may be your first time sharing that you're a survivor. I remember when it was my first time, and I was scared as I don't know what, and my first time sharing, I had to share it with law enforcement, so I was even more scared. And so we're here for encouragement, so if you see us, grab us, hug us, we'll hug you back, and we just want to see you restored fully. And thanks for letting us know that there's a survivor out here.
One of the other, there was a quick question that I can say that my organization, somebody asked about money. You know, it's always a talk about how will, we gain funds. My organization, we do residential care and we have outpatient services, but for residential care we contract with DCF, the CBCs, that we contract with them to do group care or shelter care. So, but I know that other organizations are not-for-profits, they raise money, and really it's a need for community kids, at least in the areas that I know. There's a lack of resources for community kids, especially, that are being identified. And I have some lunch instructions for all of you. There was one more question about approaching girls on the street, that it's been, leaders advise individuals not to approach girls on the street, even if they are very sure that they are being trafficked in situations. It could be unsafe, yes, so you want to make sure that you stay safe and that you keep the individual safe, of course. And with that, if you suspect, what you can do is you can collect all of the information that you can, the street corner, the description of the child. Collect all that information and write it down and make a call to the Florida Abuse Hotline. And if you don't have that number, it's 1-800-96-ABUSE. That it is mandatory reporting now, so please that's the call that you should make in the state of Florida. All those calls get funneled to the appropriate jurisdictions and they are investigated. But you have to call with some information. Every night on this corner I see this child and I believe that she's a victim. Okay? I want to thank both of you so much. Thank you.